If you happen to see my last Dollar Tree shop with me video, I showed you these boxes and they remind me of those boxes that I usually set out in my living room to hide remotes. And that's what we're gonna be making for this next DIY. Now, another great thing that I found in that video was new peel and stick wallpaper. And my favorite one was this bird paper. It is so pretty, you guys. I hope you can find it at your Dollar Tree, but I'm gonna be wrapping this box with that paper. I picked a coordinating green color that I could use around the middle portion of this box. So I started by painting the middle section green. I let that dry completely. Then I wanted to add the paper on. So I started on one edge, placing it down so it was even with the edge of the paper, wrapped it around, and I did cut it as I was going so that the edges were nice and clean, but really this was pretty easy to do. I continued to wrap it and then cut off any excess of the paper. And here's how this box looks in my living room. I found this adorable bird container out at Dollar Tree. I just think it's so cute, but I wanted to change up the color. So I sprayed the entire thing with the color Sand Dollar. Then I just added on spackling to finish it off. And here's how the container looks in my home. I've been really into blue and white decor. When I saw this vase by Magnolia, I thought this is something I could recreate with Dollar Tree items. Over in the party section at Dollar Tree, they have these clear acrylic containers with a scalloped edge. So you're gonna need one of those to create this vase. Next, I'm going to spray it white because you need a base color for our next step. Once your vase is completely dry, I'm gonna add a tissue paper on top. Now this tissue paper I picked up online on Amazon, but you could use any tissue paper you have on hand. I'm gonna add some matte Mod Podge around my vase. And then I'll place the tissue paper onto my vase, making it as straight as possible. You wanna make sure you have a little bit hanging over the bottom and the top. I'll continue to add Mod Podge and wrap the tissue paper around until I have it completely covered. Now with the bottom edge, I'm going to put a little bit of Mod Podge on the tissue paper and I'll tuck it underneath. For the top, what I like to do with this area is just tear it off very gently so that you don't break the tissue paper on your vase. But this is a great way to finish off that top edge. Now, one of my tricks whenever you're adding Mod Podge to an item is you wanna let it sit for at least 4 to maybe 6 hours before you put on your top layer. You wanna make sure that bottom layer is completely dry. Then you're gonna add on a top layer of Mod Podge. Once that dries, you can put it out in your home. Have you ever seen these recipe boxes at thrift stores and wondered what you could do with them? Well, I came across this one that was $1 and I thought it would be perfect to be a nightstand box. I love having a nightstand box where I can just put items in there that I need to get to quickly. So I wanted to DIY this first because it wasn't necessarily the style I was going for. So I started with my orbital sander, sanding down this entire box. I wanted to sand it completely so it was a blank slate. Next, I wanted to add some stain on there. I thought I was going to go with a natural stain. So that's what I added first. I put on the natural stain, pulled it off. after I looked at that natural stain, it was pulling really orange. So I knew that I needed to add some additional color. So I went with a medium tone stain, and I actually put that stain on right after I put on that natural stain. That's one of the cool things about stain is you can combine them and mix and match them. If you want to sit and, give it time to dry, you can, but you can go in with a different stain. So once I put on that different stain, it really gave that look I was going for, more of a medium tone wood. So from here, let the stain dry completely. Next, I wanted to put a stencil on top because I felt like it needed something. So I have this set of stencils off of Amazon. I will link them for you down below, but I went with the checkered stencil, and using painter's tape, I placed the checkered stencil down, and then I'm gonna be using a light green sample paint that I picked up at Lowe's. You can get any sample paints created that you want. So I'm gonna be using that sample paint. I find with stenciling like this, using a stipple brush tends to work better. So I'm gonna get some of my paint and put it out on my craft table because you really don't want to add a lot of paint when you're stenciling. So I stuck my stippling brush into my paint and wiped off any excess, and then I filled in my stencil with paint. Now, after I removed it, you can see I only did half the box. I'm gonna let this side dry completely before I do the rest of the box. Then I'll place my stencil back down and stipple around the other side. You may need to go in with a detail brush if you've had any areas that have kind of run underneath where you've put the paint, just to kind of clean up those lines. But after this dries, you can fill this with your essentials that you need by your bedside, and it just looks so great sitting out. I really wanted to dupe this next painting, and I felt like it was easy enough that I could do it. I'm gonna break down all the steps for you, and you could recreate this painting at home. You're gonna start with 2 canvases. I decided to go with 16 by 20 canvas, but if you want them larger or smaller, you could make that adjustment. I'm going to spray paint the canvases with an ivory color. My favorite spray paint lately has been Sand Dollar. I'll do 2 coats of Sand Dollar on both of my canvases. Now that my canvases are dry, I wanted to recreate those circles. Now I could paint them on, but I was afraid that I wasn't going to get them exactly right. The other thing is I really wanted them to have a raised texture. So the idea I came up with was to get a piece of cardstock, and then I took some spackling that you would use on your walls, and I spread it all over my piece of cardstock. And I wanted it to kind of have a lot of character to it. So I didn't want it to be perfect. I didn't want it to be smooth. So I put a layer on, and then I let that dry completely. I did this with 4 different pieces of cardstock because in that original piece, if you look at it, there are 12 circles. So I knew to create 2 of these, I was going to have to create 24 circles. So the next thing I did was I went into my sample paints and I pulled out 12 colors that were kind of that color scheme that I wanted. And this was pretty easy to do because this is my color scheme. I love neutrals, I love blues, I love greens. So I pulled out all of those colors, and on my cardstock, I did 3 strips. So I just picked a color, painted it on, and did 3 strips because 1 strip is going to give me 2 circles. So I did this on all 4 pieces of my cardstock. Let that dry. The next step is I needed to draw my circles. So I found a flower pot as my template, and I flipped it over to the back side and created circles on either edge, and then I created circles on the middle, making sure that I put them where I wouldn't get any of the colors mixed together. Then the next step is to just cut out your circles. You do want to flip it over on the front side and make sure you don't have any rough edges. After you get all your circles cut out, I do think it's worth it to make these circles because I love the texture they provided. I'm gonna place 12 circles on the canvas, and I measured all the sides to make sure they were the exact same. I really didn't care what they were. I honestly kind of put it where I liked the way it looked, but if I had 3 inches on one side, I wanted to make sure I had 3 inches on the other side. And I really concentrated on those outside pieces, and I knew the inside ones, I could kind of change those a little bit. So I started by hot gluing everything down. I started on the outside pieces, and then I went to the interior ones. Now you do want to make sure that you get enough hot glue that all of your edges are going to be securely down. Now I needed to replicate that on my other canvas. Now I didn't want the circles to be in the same spot, so really I tried to put them on there very randomly, but I did want my measurements to be the same. So I put everything on there and made sure I had the exact same measurements and it looked the same, and then I hot glued those in place. I did also want to add a wood frame, so I cut pieces so that they fit around the outside of my canvases. And then to attach them, I used E6000 and hot glue to secure them to the sides. And here's how these Anthropologie dupe canvases turned out. Hey guys, I'm Liz and you're watching my second DIY channel, Liz Fenwick Daily. Now you may be familiar with my first DIY channel, Liz Fenwick DIY. I'm so glad that you found me over here. I would love for you to subscribe to Liz Fenwick Daily. I post daily DIYs.